Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuart. It's Thursday, May 12th. This is Africa 54.
Somalia's parliament prepares to vote in Sunday's long-delayed but critical presidential elections. Two former presidents are the favorites. The worst drought to hit the Horn of Africa in decades has displaced hundreds of thousands of families and forced more than 600,000 Ethiopian students to drop out of school. And young Sudanese are turning to art and music to spread cheer amid the pain of violence and a weakening economy. These stories and much more on today's Africa 54.
Somalia's parliament is set to vote in a presidential election on Sunday in a long-delayed election that is vital for securing international financial assistance and in which two former presidents are the favorites. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori has more.
Somalia's long-delayed presidential election takes place on Sunday, May the 15th, though this isn't a typical vote. That would be impossible amid the violence and dysfunction of the Horn of Africa nation. It won't be people, but parliament that decides the new leader, and instead of polling stations, the election takes place in a heavily guarded airport hangar. So how does the vote work? In the absence of a functioning state, the voting system is based on a power-sharing formula. Somalia's four biggest clans have an equal number of parliamentary seats, while smaller clans share half the allocation given to the larger clans. Voting takes place over 2 rounds at the Mogadishu hangar, which African Union peacekeeping troops already in the country have been asked to protect. Let's take a look at who, out of nearly 40 registered candidates, is likely to win. One who may struggle is incumbent President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed. His rift with Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has delayed the election and divided security services, distracting from the country's fight against al-Shabaab militants who control large swathes of the countryside. Critics of Mohamed won election for the Speaker of the upper and lower houses last month, suggesting he does not enjoy popular support among lawmakers. Analysts say former presidents Sharif Sheikh Ahmed and Hassan Sheikh Mohammed are the favorites. Close contenders and likely kingmakers in the second round include former Prime Minister Hassan Al-Khairi and Puntland Region President Saeed Abdullahi Deni. But in some ways, the outcome is less important than the process. In February, the International Monetary Fund warned its almost $400 million budget support program would not be extended unless elections were completed by the middle of this month. The government cannot fund its budget or pay its soldiers without external support, and Somalia is in the grip of its worst drought in 40 years. Vincent Makori, VOA News.
The United Nations says the worst drought to hit the Horn of Africa in decades has displaced hundreds of thousands of families and forced more than 600,000 Ethiopian children to drop out of schools. Linda Giftash reports from the Ethiopian town of Gode.
This may look like fun and games, but these children are developing the skills and confidence they need to transition back to the classroom. More than 900,000 families have been displaced by the ongoing drought that has wiped out livelihoods for both herders and farmers. These children are among those who were forced to leave home.
This, due to the different psychological, trauma as a result of the displacement, drought, death of a livestock. And then so we had to set up a place where children can come, at least play, and then have some fun, and then just forget what's going around their family, around their household.
The effort has helped displaced children like Ahmed get excited about their education.
I saw children my age learning. I asked my parents to let me join school. They brought me here, and I am now at this level in grade 5.
Baseline education standards are poor in parts of Ethiopia, particularly in rural and remote communities. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, over 60% of primary school students aren't achieving pass rates high enough to succeed at higher levels of education. This means that only 54% of children make it past the 8th grade. UNICEF officials say that's why reducing disruptions to schooling is so crucial.
Because if they lose 1 or 2 school years, they will never go back to school. Because it's the issue, you know, when you are 14 and you have to sit with people that are 11 years old or 12, you don't feel comfortable, and, you know, the family is poor, so they don't see really a reason to push for that. So the impact is dramatic.
One of the incentives being offered is school feeding programs. But Save the Children had to stop offering meals to children at this school late last year because funding was not renewed. With malnutrition rising because of drought, the organization is trying to provide high-nutrition biscuits here to keep children from falling ill. In the meantime, they try other ways to urge parents to enroll their children.
We have shown them other school children who have excelled in education and used such examples to raise awareness on the importance of education.
The chance to get an education they wouldn't otherwise have in the remote rural communities can lead to a very different life from their pastoralist families. And that's what 16-year-old Noor hopes for.
I would only be a pastoralist living in a jungle. I would like to learn and then to teach, to help my parents.
With more families flooding into displacement camps every week, classrooms are increasingly overcrowded. Educators say a permanent school will need to be built for the long run. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Gode, Ethiopia.
Guinea's legislative body announced there will be a 3-year transition period before civilian rule is restored. The action defies regional partners who are calling for a swifter timetable following a coup. The 36-month transition decided at a legislative plenary meeting on Wednesday is slightly shorter than the 39 months which the military junta leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya had announced. A United Nations conference is ongoing on desertification in Ivory Coast. President Alassane Ouattara says the country wants to raise $1.5 billion to revive forests and land in the world's top cocoa producer. Clara Frank has more.
Ivory Coast aims to raise $1.5 billion for a 5-year land restoration program, its president said on Monday. In a bid to revive its forests and increase food production, President Alassane Ouattara was speaking at the start of a United Nations climate conference in the financial capital, Abidjan.
Our people expect a lot from us. We cannot disappoint their hopes. We must therefore act quickly and collectively to fight against land degradation and bring our land back to life.
Ivory Coast, the world's top cocoa producer, lost 80% of its forests between 1900 and 2021. It risks losing them all by 2050. If the pace of decline continues, Ouattara said at the COP15 summit. Ouattara did not specify whom he hoped would provide the money, but also called on the private sector to help fund a separate and ongoing $1 billion government project to restore around 7.4 million acres of forest by 2030. The new 5-year Abidjan Legacy Program would use technologies such as tree planting drones and drought-resistant plant varieties to repair degraded land. World leaders will be meeting at COP15 over the next 2 weeks, discussing ways to reverse land degradation. Ivorian Minister of the Environment, Jean-Luc Assis, emphasized the time is of the essence.
We pledge to continue to give the highest priority to the problems of drought and desertification. We reaffirm our commitment to combat desertification, halt biodiversity loss, and mitigate climate change in an integrated manner.
The United Nations says more than a quarter of the world's fertile land has been rendered non-productive, impacting the lives of 3.2 billion people, particularly in rural communities in poorer countries. Clara Frank, VOA News.
U.S. President Joe Biden is marking 1 million total COVID-19 deaths in the country on Thursday. He says that those who died left behind a nation forever changed because of this pandemic. In a statement, Biden said that Congress needs to continue funding for testing, vaccines and treatments, and that the nation must remain vigilant. The United States has recorded about 82 million total COVID cases, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. New cases and hospitalizations are rising, but the number of deaths has remained low at around 300 per day, down from more than 3,000 per day in February. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Africa 54's new Facebook page is facebook.com/VOA Africa. Be sure to join us Friday when Heather Maxwell has another hot entertainment feature. Still to come, young people in Sudan spread cheer with art and music. We'll be right back.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Economic and social progress of every society.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, all underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Democratic Party lawmakers in the U.S. have failed to pass a measure essentially codifying the right to an abortion. The vote on Wednesday followed revelations that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion almost 50 years ago. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports.
Fencing around the nation's highest court this week, as demonstrations mount in response to a leaked draft opinion showing the U.S. Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, the decision affirming a constitutional right to an abortion.
I'd really prefer that abortion remain a constitutional right. It's health care. I don't think the government should be getting in between anyone and their doctors.
Public support for abortion rights has slightly increased since the draft opinion was revealed, with just over half of Americans, 53%, saying they do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. But across the country, many are welcoming the court's anticipated move.
I'm hoping more babies will be saved. That's what I'm looking for. I would like to see it be illegal completely.
If Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion will immediately become illegal in 13 states and could very quickly be outlawed in 19 more. Senate Democrats tried to prevent that with a vote Wednesday on a measure to protect abortion rights at the federal level.
Today's vote is one of the most consequential we will take in decades, because for the first time in 50 years, a conservative majority, an extreme majority on the Supreme Court is on the brink of declaring that women do not have freedom over their own bodies, one of the longest steps back in the court's entire history.
But Democrats only narrowly control the Senate and didn't have enough votes to pass the measure over Republican objections.
Our Democrat colleagues want to vote for abortion on demand through all 9 months, until the moment before the baby is born. A failed show vote that will only prove their own extremism.
McConnell has promised to pursue a federal ban on abortion if Republicans win control of the Senate in this year's midterm elections. Meanwhile, the White House has warned that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, the nation may see birth control restricted and abortion classified as homicide.
I think we're at serious risk. You noted Mitch McConnell and other Republicans in Congress are talking about a national ban on a woman's right to choose.
The U.S. is currently one of 7 countries worldwide that allow elective abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Finland's President Sauli Niinisto and Prime Minister Sanna Marin on Thursday expressed their approval for joining NATO, a move that would complete a major policy shift for the country in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The leaders say they came to their decision after allowing time for Finland's parliament and the public to consider the matter and to consult with NATO and neighboring Sweden. Officials in Sweden are expected to consider their own possible NATO application in the coming days. The U.S. House of Representatives has approved $40 billion in new military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. The Senate aims to soon vote on the request. This follows a lending program that speeds up sending arms to the country. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has more.
As the war rages in Odessa and other Ukrainian cities, a dramatic increase in U.S. aid for the country. Just 2 months after Congress approved $13.6 billion to help Ukraine, President Joe Biden, warning that funding for military aid would run out in a week, requested another $33 billion.
The cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly. That's why we're staying in this.
Meanwhile, top U.S. intelligence officials said that Russian President Vladimir Putin appears to be preparing for a long conflict and the war in Ukraine is at a stalemate. Democrats, saying $33 billion was not enough, added $7 billion more.
Russia is going to run out of money. They're going to run out of defense material. We've got to make sure that Ukraine does not run out of money, that Ukraine does not run out of defense materials.
Earlier this week, Biden signed legislation that was similar to a World War II law that helped European countries defeat Nazi Germany. The new law allows the president to expedite sending military equipment to Ukraine. Some observers warned of Biden's increasingly hawkish posture, supported by both Republicans and Democrats in Congress.
The consequences of more or less limitless military support to Ukraine with no end in sight and the possibility of prolonging a war that poses real dangers to the security of Americans is, I think, a very serious subject that hasn't received the kind of serious debate in Washington that it deserves.
Meanwhile, Congress could not agree on the $22.5 billion funding requested to combat COVID-19, including $5 billion for global pandemic response, and removed it from the Ukraine package.
The decoupling was done because we wanted to move the Ukrainian issue much more quickly. I wouldn't say that that in any way should be looked at as demeaning the COVID question. Just right now, I think the Ukrainian issue is biting us quicker and harder and more immediately than COVID is.
Also Tuesday, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi came to the White House with the message that Europeans want a diplomatic end to the conflict.
People think that at least they want to think about the possibility of bringing a ceasefire and starting again some credible negotiations. Biden
did not echo Draghi's comments, and U.S. officials expressed skepticism that Russia is willing to talk. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
Ghana's consumer price inflation hit a recent record of 23.6% in April, with one economist saying that failure to act soon could have far-reaching implications. Olivia Chan has more.
Ghana's consumer price inflation accelerated to 23.6% year-on-year in April, the Statistics Service said on Wednesday. That's up from 19.4% in March in a recent record that one economist described as shocking. Razia Khan, Standard Chartered Bank's chief economist for Africa and the Middle East, said the spike may pressure the central bank to further tighten interest rates. She added that failure to act soon could have far-reaching implications, putting at risk any hopes for quick macroeconomic stabilization. The West African country's central bank raised its main lending rate by a record 250 basis points in March, fearing that runaway inflation compounded by a depreciating local currency and mounting national debt could ignite a full-blown economic crisis. The latest inflation reading was the highest in 18 years and more than double the government's targeted band of 6% to 10%. Prices for 295 of the 307 items analyzed by the Statistics Service rose in April. Transport, including fuel prices, saw the largest increases, up to 33.5% from 17.4% in March. Diesel costs alone up 90.9%. Food prices were up 26.6% from the previous month. That's nearly double the category's 12-month average of 13.5%. Cereal prices were among the greatest contributors, continuing a trend that began with Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February, which Moscow calls a special military operation.
Olivia Chan of Reuters filed that report. Farmers in Zimbabwe are hoping to cash in on a boom in medical marijuana, but some complain costs and strict regulations are too prohibitive. David Doyle has more.
In Zimbabwe, tobacco is known as green gold, but farmers like Munyurazi Nyanungo are hoping it's cannabis that will be the cash crop that sparks a brighter future. Analysts say the global cannabis industry could be worth $272 billion by 2028. And across economically struggling Zimbabwe, there are hopes of profiting from a boom in medical marijuana. But there are costs and regulatory barriers to getting set up, such as the requirement to use a greenhouse.
This entire greenhouse, you need something around $500,000 just to set up the structure. The plastics, the drip system, it's an additional cost, the seeds and, the other practices that we carry out in here.
Nyanungo and other producers are currently lobbying the government to relax the rules. Zimbabwean officials also recognize that Africa's biggest tobacco exporter needs to diversify. The South African country was one of the first to legalize the production of medicinal cannabis in 2018. It's issued 57 licenses, hoping for a fresh income stream of badly needed export dollars. That money has been coming in from companies like US-based King Kong Organics, giving black farmers who once struggled in Zimbabwe's dysfunctional economy a fresh opportunity to prosper. Cannabis products were on show at a national trade fair in Second City, Bulawayo earlier this month. Speaking there, Dr. Zoradzai Maraveke, the CEO and founder of Zimbabwe Industrial Hemp Trust, warned that challenges remain.
If anyone is going to grow for medical-grade cannabis, it's going to be at their risk because there are too many variables, too many factors, and so much can go wrong. So it will be a risk to the farmer.
Nevertheless, the rewards can be substantial. Operating since 2003, Nyanungo's forest farm has been growing traditional crops of tobacco and maize, as well as raising cattle. But having acquired a cannabis license in 2020, a quarter of his 80 farmhands are now devoted to that side of the business. Their first harvest is in August, from which Nyanungo is expecting more than $2.5 million in profit.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Here's a sneak peek into a special VOA documentary about residents in Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
C'est le quatrième pont qui passe ici. C'est à cause du quatrième pont, ils ont détruit tout ça ici.
À 4 heures du matin, la police nationale se retrouve avec la gendarmerie et on leur dit de sortir, ils vont déguerpir chez elle.
La maison, elle est belle, mais il y a plein de travaux qui ne sont pas encore terminés, comme la douche, le sol.
Ça peut poser d'énormes problèmes en termes de sécurité, en termes de cohésion sociale, d'avenir politique du pays.
Be sure to watch the full documentary at voanews.com/documentaries. Amid Sudan's recent years of political upheavals, many young people are turning to art and music as a way to spread cheer and cope with the pain of violence and a deteriorating economy. Trevor Corral reports.
At an auditorium in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, members of an orchestra and choir are getting ready to perform. Many here participated in the mass movement that eventually ousted longtime leader Omar al-Bashir. More recently, Sudan's witnessed a military coup and dramatically deteriorating economic conditions. For performers like Rania Magoob, music is a way to overcome pain and spread cheer.
Despite the deteriorating economic conditions in Sudan, as well as the families who lost loved ones, despite those injured and the grim reality we are in, we are still able to make people happy, to give even a small bit of hope through art, to deliver our message and make people listen to us. At the end, art is a message.
Nearly 95 protesters have died since an October 25th military coup, according to medics aligned with the protest movement. That has caused a devastating toll on the morale of many young Sudanese activists. Nevertheless, many continue to engage in artistic activities. At a primary school in the capital, Rassan Balula is working on a mural.
The school was a spot where women street sellers were detained during security raids under Omar al-Bashir. We as resistance committees managed to make the place a tool for resistance. We brought it back as a school.
He says the school will serve as a reminder for future generations.
That was Trevor Corral of Reuters with that report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our new Facebook page, facebook.com/VOA Africa. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.